All right, hello and welcome back, Chalice Seekers. When last we spoke, we were looking at the levels of Resurrection within a tier list. And as promised, we would go through each of the games in reverse chronological order in terms of release. That means, since we've done Resurrection, the fan favorite, as we all know, I can't even say that with a straight face for 2 seconds, we would be moving on then to MediEvil 2. We are going to be looking at the sequel to the original, released in 2000 today. So as you can see here, I have the levels ready to go, and to my surprise, there wasn't anything available on Tier Maker for the levels of MediEvil 2. Just Resurrection, the original, and then a smattering of other things you can do. So yours truly took it upon himself to just kind of go through and take some snapshots of the levels. So what I will do at the end of this video is leave a link for you below if you want to play around with this yourself. As you can see down here, we have 20 levels scattered out of order, and that was deliberate. I wanted to keep them out of order so that I kind of approach them with a fresh perspective. I think it challenges me a little bit more to think of one after another when it's not the case in the game. With one exception, because in MediEvil 2, as you know, some of the levels are interconnected. You have a follow-up, you have Kensington, and then the Tomb. You have Dankenstein, and then the Iron Slugger. So I think I did keep some of them bundled together in order or out of order. I'm not too sure, but it just made more sense, I guess, to keep it with the theme in many respects. But regardless, it's a little bit random, and I think it's just more enjoyable that way. And looking at these beautifully color-coded tier levels, we are not using F this time. We had that in Resurrection when we were ranking those. I knocked it out when I created this because I don't think there actually is a level in MediEvil 2 that qualifies as F. So the bottom is D, which is not to say, obviously, that there aren't any bad or weak levels in MediEvil 2. There certainly are, and we will be getting to them in a few moments. But D is the bottom tier that I'm doing for this one. I'll probably do the same for the original MediEvil. That one has already been created by another user, so we will just be continuing with that format. So D and C we can compare together because the keyword is generic. C is generic but passable. D is generic and I would say not passable. It's overly generic to the point where we would want the level to either be completely refined or not to exist in the game entirely. There's not going to be too many we have in MediEvil 2, but there's definitely at least one level that exists within that category and with those conditions. C is generic. Every MediEvil game, unfortunately, has at least a couple of those. That's just the nature of it. It's the composure of something as gimmicky, experimental, and wild, but also magical as the MediEvil series. You're just going to get a few that don't hit the mark. And so we will be having a few here in C, as we will have for the original MediEvil game. And B, the yellow color, it's B. And with B, we have good levels. These are the ones we start to look forward to, and these are the ones we get almost a little bit of a kick in. MediEvil 2 is interesting in that quite a few of the levels are shorter in nature, while some are much longer and more long-winded. With B, we have levels that start to set themselves unique in their own goals and settings that they were trying to put together in terms of their design. But B does still have some drawbacks that maybe keep it from being the masterclass that we will see in S and even a little bit in A. We're going to see a lot of strong stuff in these top two tiers. With B, there is still a lot to be celebrated, I think, for what we are able to play through, but I already know that the ones that we have here, there's enough to keep it back simply because it creates more vexation based on how you have to navigate or some of the gimmicks that fail and but pull back from the experience that we would have had otherwise, which we know we can have in this game because we're going to have the levels here, as mentioned. So why don't we just get to those? And on to A, this little lime green A. We are now in the good stuff. So this is where we do get excited for the levels. It's going to be very tricky for me to margin A and S because A is going to have levels that I think pull off just about everything. A couple of these levels I would even say, could be put in here, but that would be sort of a matter of debate between me and you, the viewer, or the fan base in general for the MediEvil franchise. So A is basically a level that does its gimmicks well. It is unique. It has great letting and level design. It's a joy to go through. It has good puzzles. It could be a great boss fight where instead of just having basic factors, there's a little twist involved. It has music that orchestrates the experience to elevated levels for our pleasure. So that's what's going to go in here, but they just don't quite compose together in a way that is the experience of exuberance that we have. We're talking about the sublime. I'm using the big S word here. And speaking of S is for sublime. That's what it is. It means sublime. Always has, always will. No, I made that up. But for me, it does. What we're going to have here are the best of the best. These are some of the best levels, not only in the franchise, not only in MediEvil 2, but what I think about in video games. I love this series to death. So what we are seeing in here for MediEvil 2 is what I have carried with me to this day since I was a young guy living in the Canadian prairies, sitting alone in his folks' basement at the tender age of 14, 15 on his PlayStation or PS2, going through what we would see here as the greatest memories we have in this series. You cannot describe what these do. Think about what I said for A, and it is something like an artist who is just able to make a few paint strokes, a couple of proper chisels on what they are trying to dreamcast into our world, and it becomes something that is indelible in your life. You just don't know how else to put it. These are not little niche experiences, these are special. Special, sublime, you gotta love S tier, you gotta love tier lists. So I think we're just about ready to go. I think we've gone over the criteria. Again, I apologize for taking so long to get this video out. There's just been a lot going on in my life. Good stuff, really good stuff. Like personally speaking, I've just been crazy busy, but really good busy too. You know, work is going well. I'm spending a lot of time with my friends. I'm reading so much more than I normally do. You know, I've got some books I might even sort of bring into the video in a way because it's been making me think of this tier list as I was getting it ready. Even as I have notes, so you know, we have this here that I'm going to be sort of making sure I'm at least composed and consistent as we go through these levels, but I just didn't have the time for a little while. I also got a girlfriend, which is kind of nice. I was single for about a decade or so. Thought it was time to get me one of those, and she's absolutely wonderful. And she recommended that I get back into this, so bless her heart. You can thank her for this video today. That's your sponsor, I suppose. Okay, let's get to it. And first up is Cathedral Spires: The Descent. What were they thinking when they made this level? We are starting off with a very difficult one. There is a lot I love about this level, but this is easily the most difficult level in the series. MediEvil 1, 2, and Resurrection, this is the hardest. As soon as you enter, you are given an opportunity to save, thank goodness for that, and then you are met with what is the most evil chandelier in any video game ever. You step on, if you can even step on, you might have a fall death right away, but you actually have to go between different platforms and crevices as you go down to collect the spirits, which you need in order to finish the level. And that's just the beginning. That's just the part where you need to hit a switch and make sure that you get the camera to go along with you. So the camera is trying to kill you alongside the chandelier. You have two things. You haven't fought anything yet. You got two things that are trying to kill you. And trust me, I've had game overs when I was younger just because of that section. Once you make it past that, it still retains the difficulty. But I do know what I spoke positively of is that there is a sadistic part of me that just enjoys levels like this where they are so challenging. It really makes you adapt through hardship, trial, and tribulation. I love Bloodborne for that reason. I love FromSoft games for that reason, Souls-likes, etc. I've been a huge fan of those for years. You get a bit of an aura in this as well, especially for something like Bloodborne, because there is a sense of demonic presence even elevated from the previous section in Cathedral Spires. Remember that this is a transitory level. This comes after Cathedral Spires. The stage is set for the end game. You are here, Palethorn is here, this is it. So the fact that we get into the interior, the belly of the beast, so to speak, it contains that atmosphere to such a remarkable level that you know what you're doing while you're here. So as you die again and again, you know that this is kind of what's meant to happen. It still feels a little unfair though. It is so hard to the point where you think they could have given you a bit of a break, a shortcut of some kind, or another checkpoint. I wouldn't say another checkpoint actually, just a section where you could have an additional life fountain, for instance, some treasure to use, when you're chatting with the spiv to do another trade-in. At this point, you're likely broke as hell, and you have nothing. You don't have any more Gatling gun ammunition, or blunderbuss, or anything like that to continue on, and your life is just miserable. There is a lot of platforming and aerial navigation that you need to do here. This is insanely difficult. So for that reason alone, it is not going to be high in the ranking, but it does everything else so well. As an endgame level, this is endgame. To me, there is a genuine sense of triumph when you make your way past everything. I always feel good, especially when you get to the crumbling section, which is at the very end where you sacrifice the spirits to make your way to Palethorn. Even with a countdown, you could fail, and you could fail again. I've failed a number of times, so thank goodness that it doesn't send you to the beginning back to Winston to redo the madness that is the killer chandelier and everything else that is trying to end you as Dan. The only rewarding thing really aside from all of that is the life bottle. There's actually a section where you modify part of the level and you are working with yourself as Headless Dan. You have Dan the Hand doing some other puzzles, and there's even a section where they give you a little break as you mess with the machinery, which I also thought was just a nice touch, not just in terms of grace that the developers are giving you, but the fact that it looks really wonderful. You're in the interior and it makes you feel a part of the world, the dark, drab world that you are in at the end at this point. It is your last time, after all, doing anything with the hand itself. The space usage is great. You have the gondolas in that platform section where the space really spreads out and gives you a sense of movement and to feel around the area as you explore and look for the remaining spirits. There's a lot to say about this level. I love what it does in terms of atmosphere, of feeling, and what it evokes in you as you are trying to make your way through, and that does include the difficulty. But I think that is the breaking point for a lot of people. This is crazy hard. You could think of this level as a Smo and Ornstein moment in the game, albeit that was mid-game in Souls. This is endgame, which is a shame because in both instances it keeps you from experiencing the remainder of the title, which has something enjoyable and rewarding for you to see, especially in the sense of Souls, because you have so much more of the game to go through. But the difficulty spike really does give a sense of discouragement to the player, and that is kind of a part of it, right? You're supposed to engage with your terms of vulnerability and what you feel within yourself. That frustration is something to be engaged in a productive sense, in a kind of growth for oneself, which is why I love games like that where the difficulty is deliberate so that you see something about the human condition in it, and I feel that with The Descent. So where are we going to put it? Oh, this is tough. As tough as The Descent itself. A part of me wants to put it in A, but I'm not going to. I am going to put it in B. The difficulty spike is on the unfair side, and that is something I stand by, as I said in the ranking video too. There isn't enough to help carry you through with the rewarding aspect of overcoming something and then, say, giving you a life fountain or treasure, something that you can actually utilize in the time of endgame. Because even after this level is done, you have the final boss, which is also quite difficult. If you have nothing, you just need to leave. And I wish that was something that they had entered into here, which were more opportunities to add to your arsenal, to strengthen you, to renew you, something to heal you, for heaven's sake. There is a life bottle, but we know what happens there. You get jumped by a bunch of demons that are out for your blood, or your bones, I suppose. Poor Dan. And next up, from the inside to the outside, from the descent to the ascent, and that is Cathedral Spires. I like Cathedral Spires more than the descent. The outside is what invites you to the end game. I absolutely love how this feels. The camera panning upwards and upwards to the top of the tower gives you an idea that this is a vertical adventure. You're going to be climbing more than you have in just about any other adventure you've done in MediEvil 2 so far. This is it. You are here. Palethorn is just around the corner. As that camera panning that was mentioned, we have this hellfire almost pouring out of that punctuated tower that we see before us, which itself is a demonic kind of presence. We see the demons flying around, and with the music behind it all, that kind of chills you as you make your way up. You know you are in it for the long haul. This is it, and this is the end. You feel that the entire way through. And this is carried well into the descent, but this is what starts it. for the end game. I love this level. But it is difficult. It is not as difficult as what we just discussed, but it is hard. What is expected of you here is awareness. You are not only trying to make sure you are watching hazards and taking demons out, you are also keeping an eye on the spirits. I do like that there is a little bit of collectathoning as you're making your way through this. You're perusing as you are combating, as you are being careful with everything that you need to do to prepare for the very end of this game. That aura does not leave as you go through it. And you get that sense of heroism, not only with this armor, but just by your very movements and actions in this game. The design brings all of that out. I don't think I have too much to say about Cathedral Spires. I think it is something that, at the very least, is an A tier. I wouldn't quite put it at S because I think there could have been more room for, I would say, inner crevices to search for the spirits. I think a couple of them are sort of along the way. They're not too well hidden, and so you don't really have to exercise your awareness as much. And I think that could have been a little kinder with healing items and things that you could do to gain treasure so that you could trade that in with the spiv. So a problem that I was mentioning here in the Descent, it's much worse in the Descent because I think you have a much higher requirement based on the difficulty setting that is increased tenfold here. But we could have done that here for the Cathedral Spires as well. But in terms of setting and how it invites us into the endgame, beautiful, lovely. And now for something completely different. Yes, I am quoting Monty Python. That is on purpose because Frankenstein may as well been something that came out of a Monty Python skit. It is just so out there, and I love it for it. You gotta love British humor, especially when it is just so... It is just both so out there and warming at the same time. I don't know what it is. Frankenstein looks and plays like something out of a children's horror tale, and yet it is something that is a quick burst of fun. What I like about it right off the top of my head is the time limit. Normally, I don't actually like this in a game or any level, but it works well here. And it's actually a generous amount too. You should be able to get the limbs that you need with a few minutes to spare. You'll fail once or twice, but I think in terms of difficulty and time constraints, it's pretty good. The chalice is well hidden. The train adds a little bit of character to the level as well in terms of design and just kind of what it's doing there. It might be sort of off in the background as you're looking for other limbs, arms and legs, and then you see that it can take you to other areas as well. You can follow it, and then eventually you get your ass that you need for your fight against the Iron Slugger. So there's a lot of little things in this level, despite your short time here, that create something memorable, and I think I was a bit too hard on this when I was going over it in my ranking, but I can't help but think about this as anything beyond good. I just can't. It is something that is sort of meant as an intermission. It is meant as something that you are preparing for another submission or smaller level as well, which we will get to a little bit later with the Iron Slugger. It's fine. I don't think we could do anything really beyond E. You could make the case actually for C, but I think that it is just too short-lived based on what we get to encounter and experience in this game, because this does shoot for the stars, as MediEvil 2. Frankenstein is just something that is a little too quick-footed. You're moving around, and it's nice to change the pace from a massive level we just encountered prior. This is after the freak show, so we have that freak show sense and character that is carried on here as though it's invading the lab itself, which is very clever if deliberate, if that was what was intended by the developers. So it does carry on from the level really well and then carries forward into the Iron Slugger too. But it's just the nature of the level I don't think I can really hold to my heart. It just doesn't do enough for me to think of it as something, hey, have you played, Frankenstein? Do you remember that level? It's just a build-up to the Iron Slugger, which, granted, is enjoyable, and we will be getting to that shortly. But I think overall, it's successful in what it tries to accomplish as sort of an intermediary substance of the game. If it is okay, I'm only going to do it once during this tier list, but I am going to cheat, and I'm just going to go ahead and talk about the Iron Slugger, which is after the Greenwich section here. We'll just skip you in front of the line there. I'm so sorry, Greenwich. We will get to you next. But the Iron Slugger was a level that I actually got some pushback on in my ranking level because people were talking about how I didn't really talk as much about the music, which granted is fantastic and iconic for this series. I actually thought that the boxing mechanics and how they worked with the controls and the setting at this time in the year 2000 was really, really good, mechanically speaking. It controlled as well as it could for a PS1 era game, and it had a success with the gimmick as well, where you are losing your limbs to a series of encounters that you can have with the Iron Slugger as you recover them between the bouts. But it is something that never loses its luster. The soundtrack is a certified banger, and whenever Dan is, it gets you jacked up to get into the next round, which each are an absolute thrill to get to. I never get bored of this level. I never get bored of the Iron Slugger. I think the reason I was so hard on it was because of Dankenstein. It was sort of the quick nature of it. That you're there, and then that is about it. You don't actually get to do much level exploration. There's not really much adventure there. You go there, you fight, and then you leave. But there is so much for what it is trying to accomplish that it does with excellence. I love Palethorn dancing in the back, and I love how quickly it actually moves between the rounds. It respects your time. It makes you feel like you really are just playing the game for what it is. You aren't wasting time. So I think I'm going to put this... The music already makes it go quite high. We'll put it in A. Yep. Some people might even put it higher. I don't know. I don't think by the essence of what Iron Slugger is, it can go in S, simply because it doesn't do enough to reinvent what we love about gaming, not just the series. S is where we are seeing things in MediEvil or MediEvil 2 that we really don't see outside of it, right? That is a major aspect of why I love this series. I didn't quite see that with Iron Slugger, albeit it has a case to be made for what it does in terms of its experimentation in boxing. It does it so well. I want to play this level right now. It's getting me in the mood to do a little bit of boxing. I used to do MMA, I used to do jiu-jitsu and a little bit of Muay Thai. It's a lot harder than it looks. And when you get a kick or a punch to your sides, oh boy, you're done. I miss it. I miss MMA. I should do it again. I'll dress up as Dan. I'll put on a little skull on top or something and some excessively large muscles to go with it. Ernest, why are you wearing all that? Oh, I just did the Dankenstein level. Let's do some fighting. It's your dad joke for the day. I'm full of dad jokes. I'm a living dad joke library. Just warning you. And next up is Greenwich Naval Academy, where this is the one that follows from the Observatory. The Observatory is the better level. I'm just going to tell you that right off the bat. But Naval Academy is fine. That's about it, though. That's exactly where I would put it. That is an easy placement for me. It carries on the horror vibes that we experienced in the Cthulhu-esque Silent Hill-like experience that we get in the Observatory. It doesn't pay dues to what we just experienced prior, which we will go over in a moment, as the boss experience we have at the end, where Palethorn just lets his sidekicks try and take care of you, and of course they fail miserably. It's really just a matter of kiting them around the stage until you beat them. There's really nothing special there. I like the puzzle that you have to do with Dan's head, where you use it as a viewpoint and then having to hit the switches so that you are grabbing it at its proper placement. In subsequent playthroughs, it may be tedious, but it's fine for me. And the first few times that you do it, I think it works well, and it carries on what you were already starting to work and experiment with in the Observatory, in the shipyard that preceded the Naval Academy. But there's more of a military setting here. You have a few combat encounters, you do a little bit of climbing, and then you are making your way as an accidental hero as you crash in on Palethorn's progress. So all of that, how it comes together in the theme of what Dan is and what he represents in the series, is quite well done. But there isn't much beyond that. I almost want to put it in C. Not because I don't like it, but just because this is something that was too fast for its own good and could have had a little more content in it. But it is a follow-up, and it is meant to be a follow-up from the previous level, which already was quite beefy and generous in the content given. So we'll keep it there for now. And speaking of generous content, let's go to the Observatory. what we have with the observatory is basically where MediEvil meets horror. You don't experience anything like the Greenwich Observatory in the original game. I never felt a sense of horrifying dread, a sense of isolation that made me feel uneasy or unsettled in myself. The music alone is able to capture you with what you are up against in this haunted area, and that is exactly how you would describe it. This is a large level, and as soon as you start to step forward, you realize that things are kind of turning on its head, or rather it's taking your head away. You now have a new mechanic that is introduced to you, and you have a couple of opportunities, or not opportunities, you're actually forced to do them, where you have to figure out what it is that you're doing in order to work between Headless Dan and Dan's head in proximity to what you're doing. So you have the viewpoint, you're able to collect information or a viewpoint based on where your head is now, but you are also left vulnerable. So it actually introduces a sort of vulnerability to the encounters that you can have with these creatures that are literally trying to leech the life away from you. These things are scary. When I was younger, I actually felt very uneasy going against these guys. I don't know, I don't think I had nightmares as far as I remember. It's not like it's the piano from Mario 64 or anything like that, but it's up there. All to say that this is a horror level done exactly as a horror level should be. And this is not a horror game, this is not a horror series. But the first time they try it in the game is phenomenal. All you need to do is when you're out and about, go to a coffee shop, just enjoy yourself, go on a nice date. But then at the back of your head, start to play the music that Bob and Barnes so wonderfully construe for the purpose of this level, and you'll start to feel something happen to your blood pressure. You'll all of a sudden want to hydrate yourself a little bit more. It's interesting how atmosphere has that effect on you, and it always has that on me, whether or not I am playing this level. And I can honestly stop there just to conclude that it is a great level, but really it is how it allows you to explore. There is an aspect of adventure in the shipyard. I love wandering around and getting idea that there was something of function here, of social function, that we have civilization, and that everything is dead and now haunted by its past, now rendered hostile to what Dan needs to do here. We have a graveyard of sorts here that we need to make our way through, as though we are being watched around every corner, as though there is something peeking and waiting to predate itself on us. It's just fantastic. I think we are just going to put that straight in A, but where are we going to put you in A? I am going to put it above Iron, we're going to put it above Iron Slugger. I'm sorry, my guy. Good level, but the observatory is able to do what Cathedral Spires did in terms of punctuating what it is meant to elicit in the feeling based on the environment. It is evocative and it is extremely well designed. The skybox I didn't even really mention much. I thought that was kind of a nice touch. I didn't really think about it much in here just because of the audio and how that makes you feel. That alone is what bumps it up so high for me, but it is also just well designed in terms of the space usage we have for it. Well done to the team on the observatory. Fantastic. And next up is Kensington the Tomb, and then Kensington. I don't know why I keep doing that. I promise you that was not on purpose, but we have the follow-up again preceding the original level. That is to say, we have a much shorter version than the original which preceded it. So the tomb is fine, but I don't have much to really say about it. I think I already know that I'm going to put it here. Despite being meant as a smaller venture, it does still beg to have more in it. I think it is really the puzzle that lets us down a little bit. The boxes get pushed and pulled as you need to ascend to these heights in order to gain the items before you meet Kia and carry her out beautifully from the level. But there isn't really much memorable apart from the fact that you are carrying her out, that this is kind of the outro and it makes you curious as to what is happening here. It is a foreshadow of things to come, and I think it is beautifully done in that it is silent in its presentation, which makes you more curious as a result. Almost dramatic. It's quite well done. Still makes me smile how beautiful it is and how hard it is to see her ripped away from the literal Ripper that we'll be encountering later. There's great lighting involved, and I'm not even talking about how we have to use a torch, or if we like to sort of use that to navigate within the spaces so that we have a little more to see. I just mean that it is dank in respect to sort of a catacomb presence, almost even something you would have in the Crypt of Dan in the original game. I'm struggling to find anything more memorable beyond that. I think that really is it for it, and I think that is forgivable given the fact that this is meant to be a finisher to Kensington. And Kensington is an awesome level. It is so awesome, it is going in S. This is the second full level you get to do. You get the museum, you get the follow-up of the museum, which is a boss fight, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and then here in Kensington, we get a town. We are exposed to the wider world of what would have been Gallowmere once upon a time, but what is now London. 19th century London, all scattered throughout with the living dead and these pompous aristocratic style villains that serve as officers which are able to resurrect the living dead in order to give you the welcome that we were given in the original MediEvil in the graveyard. This is the spiritual successor to the graveyard. This is your hello to the world that we are in now. And it does a much better job than the graveyard does. As iconic and as classic as the graveyard is, Kensington actually gives you the opportunity to explore what is basically a downtown section of something major that we can actually relate to civilization. I've been to London, I have traveled all across Europe. It's just so graciously designed. Everything that comes together in terms of the urbanity, which makes me think of my times when I've traveled to London and in other European countries, such as Germany, Poland, and Czech Republic. It reminds me of the cityscape that we get to sort of dream walk our way through. It is something that gives you the stuff of poetry in action right before you, which we now have in a video game that we're able to interact with. This was something special for me when I first played it many, many years ago. The gothic vibe-driven soundtrack is endlessly wonderful. I could listen to it in the background and on my Spotify as I please, and indeed it is on Spotify. In addition to the city itself, we are going inside certain buildings. We are going into Palethorn's house and study. We are going to a Portstead warehouse, where they all serve a purpose. This is a level where everything has a landmark. Even the bridge, which has a railway going above the tunnels that we make our way through between the two sections, is where you get the chalice. Everything is designed with care and with, I dare say, love. It's Cambridge Studio. Everything they do is with love, and we love you too, Cambridge. So it's funny to think of this level with everything that it has done and so excellently well that we are going from interior to interior again. But it actually does both here, as we are working with the wonder that is a town full of secrets and mystery as we figure out what is going on with the living dead making their way in the middle of the streets. And this is our encounter also with, well, not encounter. It is our introduction to the villain as well, at least sort of a proper introduction. We see the cinematic and we get a sense of the darkness that is to come based on how we explore the study and then make our way back into the museum. There is nothing I can say really bad about it, except maybe that there was a little bit more, but that is just greedy old me being petty and saying, give me more of the good stuff. But we have a lot of that in Kensington. I never get tired of it. I love that this is the perfect opening to the game. I get that the museum is really the opening, but this is Kensington saying, welcome to MediEvil 2, just as the graveyard did in MediEvil 1. All right, and next up, we have a horticultural nightmare turned masterclass in MediEvil 2. This is none other than Kew Gardens, and it is going straight to the top at this time. We'll start with the negative, because there's so little of it. The positives outweigh the good by a long shot. The negative here is that there isn't too much to help you navigate with fluidity in the level. It's constricted in that you have to go to specific spaces and pieces of the level in order to get back to previous rooms. I'm speaking, of course, about the hunt and search that you have for the cogwheels that allow you to go to different spaces as you unveil the level moving forward as you make your way to the end. But it creates a lot of backtracking, which even for a level this wonderful, something that could let you skip between different sections would have just made this the smoothest experience possible and would have popped this up even further when it comes to my overall ranking for the entire series, as I'm sure it would for other fans as well. But that aside, everything else is beautiful. It is a wonder and a pleasure to navigate between all of these interconnected areas as well, especially the first time you make your way through each room. Because not only are you there, for instance, in search of an item or to save the civilization and what remains of the peasant folk there from the pumpkin madness, raining upon them with their corruption and what they're doing there, introducing a new mechanic, by the way, where you have to save them, you are actually having to remember what is going on in each of these sections. They're very well designed and detailed because you will have to come back at some point to many of these sections in order to reclaim something that is inaccessible at the time, but later made accessible because of a cogwheel or something that you switch on as you explore further. This is level design at its finest. You won't find too much at the time of the PS1 and 64 Sega Saturn era as you will with Kew Gardens. Like I said, with the shortcuts aside, and that is a drawback granted, you are getting something that is as enriching as something can possibly do when everything is collected together. All the rooms, all the spaces, the frightful mutations you have with the pumpkins as a harkening back to the pumpkin levels you had in the original game, and just how everything serves a purpose in the same way Kensington did, where each room and each space has something for you to pick up, unravel, or to consider as you continue exploring the rest of this level. Then the music. Bob and Barn, my goodness, your imagination is endless, as was the Cambridge Studios design for this level. You have really what comes across as a massive royal garden. It's something that takes my heart and lets it glide to and fro. It swoons with the music as I make my way room to room. These subtle xylophone sounds, it's almost like little chimes eventually as they get to the strings. There's almost nothing like it in other levels. It captures you in the garden and in what is a heroic encounter with people in need of aid, and as you continue your quest to see what is going on with London under the spells and puppeteering work of demonic instrumentation under Pale Thorn's malevolent gaze. Kew Gardens is what I carry with me to this day as one of my most cherished memories from the PS1 and 64 Saturn era. This is what I mean by S tier, and this is MediEvil 2. This is something I continue to enjoy to this day, 25 years later. I love Kew Gardens. And we are on to the Count. This is a difficult placement, but in a good way. This is going to be high. The Count is something you wouldn't expect in respect to quality from a boss fight in MediEvil. The charm of Cambridge is executed so well with the intro, where we have this epic opening and unveiling of who the Count is, who is really well designed, actually, and pivoted to something that is your typical Cambridge humor. The Count, after we make our way to the fight at the very beginning, is all of a sudden something that becomes, I think, one of the biggest surprises ever in the MediEvil series, which is that we have a genuinely great boss fight. Like I said, I think this is the best of the fights and encounters that we have in the series. This ranks high with some of my favorites from the generation. If you had listened to Winston before, you'll think reflect on what I said, and after some experimentation, you'll notice that you have these little objects around the room, the mirrors, and that is what you're using, carrying on that instrumentation from the previous level, which is the use of light against a vampire. Excellent transition, my goodness, it's great. So you're pushed and pressured to make an effort in aligning those lights as you are taking him on. And it is beyond epic when he is able to pull back and almost nuke you with all of these napalm assaults around you, as you seem to be covered in this firework ensemble. It's like an orchestration of explosions and power that overwhelms you as you are trying to fight back against him. The music, of course, we have to talk about that in just about every level, as you know, because Bob and Barn are just masters of their craft. The strings that dispel joy and yet are able to pound in tandem with the Count's attacks and his momentum that he has against you, and the danger that he poses if you should dare to stay still or not be quick enough on your feet. It coincides with that perfectly. The second phase, where we take him on in what appears to be his true form, which is basically this Slavic bodybuilder, I suppose. He kind of looks like your cool Chad who's hanging out on the beach. They put a little twist on the mirror usage that you need to use and execute on the Count again, but to wondrous satisfaction. There isn't really anything I can say bad about this boss fight other than it doesn't go beyond in terms of innovation. But I think it is able to match just about anything you could name at the time. This is, after all, pre-Souls and pre-Nier Automata and Platinum Games, Devil May Cry, etc. This is before a time where we had the technology available to us, or I should say to game developers, as they were putting all of these maddening adventures in their mind together for something like a frenetic and awe-inspiring encounter, that this was about as good as it got. I will die on that hill. I apologize. No, I don't apologize. I will not. I said I would die on that hill. The Count. Going in A for sure. Do I put it ahead of Cathedral Spires? No. I think this is fine. My goodness, the music is just stuck in my head right now, and this has been happening for just about every level as we've been going through. My goodness, don't you just love MediEvil music? Next up, we are downgrading to another boss fight, which is the Demon, and that is the final boss fight in the game. Think back to what we were saying about the Descent in Cathedral Spires and how we were really just upping the difficulty, which corresponds to the endgame difficulty and what you would imagine happens at the end of a game. This is where everything comes together. The Demon has the making of a final boss encounter, and that doesn't include the difficulty. And that's good. I think the final boss of a game, especially in a retro title like this, should be difficult, soul-crushing even, but it has to be done the right way. And I think that's what the Demon was lacking. There is a sense of spectacle you have as there's this overhead panning of imposition from the Demon as he slams and breathes fire against you. That is wonderful, but Palethorn, who is limited to attacks from your raged weapons only. No, I actually have it written here. Palethorn is the downfall of our last moments here, restricting use to ranged weapons and limiting the three-dimensional space with which to execute on his hitboxes. Downfall, I think, is actually the right word, and that does sound harsh. But yeah, why would you limit it to something like that, especially when all we're doing with the Demon itself, in its spectacular fashion, is dodging, and then this annoying ass who's on a machine just pummeling down on us with a very unfair hitbox sense with all of the strikes that are made, takes away from the experience, from a final boss fight. It's divisive in that there was huge potential for this being something on the level of spectacle with something like the Count, but they decided to space it out between two pieces working together, and it forced you to address one aspect of that piece, so that's Palethorn in the ship, with this annoying limitation that, I hope you got, good range weapons, I hope your Gatling gun is loaded up, otherwise you're in a lot of trouble because it's a long fight. What I said about the hitboxes too is that it really does cripple your ability to fight fairly when it comes to the range space that he comes in. Palethorn's barrages just feel really unfair, and you don't have a lot of time to respond with your own attacks as well. Even if you do have the Gatling gun, this still remains quite a challenge, especially when you are in the last section of the Demon and you are just getting hounded, stunned alive by his strikes. And there are many times where I've had death encounters based on the fact that I was stunned and then hit by the Demon and lost a life bottle immediately. Feels good, don't it? And it's all a shame because the fight is good and there is a sense of grandeur in the darkness that is coming to full fruition of Palethorn's twisted vision for what he wants of the world. It is your classic antagonist come full circle with what he wants to do and what we have seen from the very first intro in the game. It is just very flawed, and it could even be to the point that when you do actually achieve victory over him, it may not even be to your satisfaction, but just to the fact that you can finally rest from the game's ending. It is memorable, but how memorable? Let's let the tier list decide. Another tough one, I think I'm going to put it in C. Like I said, potential. It emanates with great things that could have been done with it, and we have seen that in other encounters such as the Count and what we will see in a bit with Tyrannosaurus Rex, for instance. Didn't quite happen here, and parts of it just feel cheap to the point where we cannot feel satisfied in our endeavors as we take him on. I've never actually beaten the Demon and gone, yes! It's not like a Sekiro encounter or anything like that. It's just why it's so hard. So If you haven't fought him yet, get your Gatling gun ammo ready. And next up is the sewers. And that's not the time machine sewers where we go back as a return. We're talking about the OG. So this is just after our saddening and tragic encounter with the Ripper, who has stolen our waifu away from us. The sewers is one of the more unique levels in that we are encountering another civilization that actually works in tandem with our efforts, and who we, with our time there, serve while we are grieving our loss of Kia. The Molochs themselves aren't really unique or interesting as a species or a group of characters there. They feel like a placeholder for people who are just there as a purpose of heroic sacrifice that you are trying to do as you grieve your way through the sewers. And the sewers, I guess, could also be sort of an exemplification of how we are feeling within our own psyche, the despair and depths of our sadness and sorrows from what we have just lost. But it is also the fact that we have other life around us, and apparently there is other life that really enjoys Dan, as we can see him idolized within this culture. So there were some interesting ideas that happen here, but I've never really been a big fan of the Molochs and how they've operated. They have these damn tentacles that you have to take down in order to rescue the women that have been kidnapped by them. How gross is that? Search and destroy is something that we find in a lot of levels, and this is a classic gameplay purpose set function in that you are making your way through the level with this that pushes you forward in the exploration of a given design that's presented to you. And the design of the level itself is good. There's a lot to explore here, though it's not as compelling or atmospheric as other sections of the game. I do like what the sewers does though. The music, for example, here is unique because you're actually reflecting on your stage of the story rather than the stage itself. The stage is just a placement and you're making your way through, and despite what's happened to you, you have to push forward. You are still the hero at the end of the day, and as with responsible individuals in life, you know, when hardships come your way, while you grieve, you just need to carry on. You press forward with the things that you need to do in life, and with Dan, that is saving people who are in need of help. Poor guy. We go forward with good puzzles, for instance. I really like the down on the hand puzzles that we have here. It's actually something that has some of the best replayability value when it comes to those puzzles in MediEvil 2. What I really like about the level is the spirit in which it captures us as a player through Dan in a time where he is experiencing loss. And it makes me think, you know, on the losses in my life. It's not really that profound, right? We're not talking about Shakespeare or Chaucer or anything like that, right? It's not the stuff of Dostoevsky or Russian literature, but it's still nice nonetheless. What we're going to do with the sewers is we are going to put it at the top of B for what it does really, really well. The wife search, don't care for it. If only there was something easier and more accessible to take down those damn hentai monstrosities away, then I would have put it even higher. But alas, those tentacles keep everything down. They always make things worse. Keep them out of video games, why don't you? At least keep them out of my games. I'm being petty, I know. And I'm being weird. Let's move on to the next one. Oh, speaking of weird. Oh, we got weird, all right. This is the Freak Show. I love the Freak Show. Oh my goodness. The Freak Show is one of the most generous in terms of quantity and quality of content. This is a huge level, robust, with a volume of encounters, stages you can go to, interior, exterior, and the way it all connects together. And it is also landmark filled as well. Just like other levels such as Kensington and Kew Gardens, we have something that is purpose driven here. The Freak Show is S tier for sure, but as much as the others, you could make a good case that this is actually beyond these other two. But I'm not going to make that case here. I am going to actually put it just after Kensington. Just barely. I like the tight design of Kensington a little more. It makes it feel as though it was more carefully orchestrated together. The Freak Show, on the other hand, which could be put further as a result, I like the atmosphere better in Kensington. That said, the Freak Show is exactly what it sets out to be. The music is able to take this bouncy, bubbly, and completely erratic sense of monsters and twistedness that are trying to prevent you from making progress in this level. It is colorful, experimental in its overall design, that is the lighting, that is the color usage, and just filled with variety in design. We have some of the more darker spaces in some of the tents. You have the LSD tunnel that takes you to and from one of the elements that you need in order to finish the level, and is an example of something that it pulls from previous MediEvil levels as well. In this case, this is Scarecrow Fields, one of my favorite levels ever in video games, and from the original MediEvil. Oh, it warms my heart whenever I go through one of those sections. It is a blast and an incredibly thoughtful composition of things coming together to full fruition of an excellent level. That is where MediEvil thrives at its best, and indeed the Freak Show thrives. Long live the Freak Show. We are now moving to the very beginning of the game, the equivalent, in some sense at least in terms of introduction, the dance script of MediEvil 2. This is far and away the strongest opening of any MediEvil game. We have a full-fledged level as well as an atmosphere second to none between the introductions that we get. We are in 19th century England, and we get that through the music as we finally explore and get our feet wet with Dan in this new title of MediEvil 2. In theme and in music, we get a sense of antiquity and a slight sense of danger as we move our way through what is a hostile environment in a museum where we are wondrously kept for the viewing public. And what interesting things they have here for the viewing public. They have Zarok there, they have stories of Dan, and they even have some curious stolen goods from other countries there as well, which I thought was a nice touch. You gotta love imperialism, and I'm glad that there were people like those at Cambridge Studio who can joke about it here. It's just so good in terms of how you can juxtapose that in respect to everything else is there, and know that it just doesn't belong. It's a classic museum. What it's really about though is the presentation in introduction. It is a presentation of what it means to play MediEvil 2. This is what you're doing, and this is how you are getting used to the changes here that we didn't quite experience in the original game. You have two weapons now, for instance. You have a melee and a range that you can switch back and forth from. Excellent. There are even differences in animations. For example, as soon as you start swinging your small sword against the zombies in the first section, you are actually taking off their limbs. And they even skitter away as you start to take off enough damage. Not something really present in the original game. There are multiple rooms to explore. We get a very generous introduction to what kinds of enemies we'll be encountering, even using different items like the torch with the cannonball as we have to make our way forward towards the Tyrannosaurus Rex. The rooms are well decorated, everything is detailed to the nines. I've been to the Natural History Museum in London, and I almost have kind of a better appreciation for it as a result. I imagine that this was sort of something that they were taking notes of, that is the animators before they were putting this together, that maybe they took a trip or two down there to look at some dinosaur bones and some ruins of old before deciding that this is going to be our adventure for Dan in the sequel to MediEvil. I just love it. So it sets the sequel up amazingly, and I think we are just going to go ahead and throw it in A. I'm going to put it just below the Count. I almost want to put it above, but the Count is just such a memorable boss encounter that I think we're going to let him keep his spot. But the margins are razor thin for many of these levels, and the museum is wonderful. Very worthy of A tier. And now I want to go back to the Natural History Museum. And up next, we have all three of the Time Machine levels, including the Ripper boss fight. So we are starting off with the Return to the Museum. So we had just started talking about that. The Return to the Museum is good in that you are not actually going to revisit assets that we had just seen in the museum, or even in the tomb for Kensington. In this case, we're going through a few clever puzzles situated in different rooms before we make our way to another section in the time machine before we go to rescue Kia. So we have one that is basically a space station expo. You have one that is a national musical theme, which when you read the joke entry about it into the tome next to it, you get a sense of national flexing when you have this song that's supposed to attract life out there, as though to say that we are such great life. You know, you really get that in the joke and the satire here that is present. It's very well done. The other puzzles are good. One of them is really just a Dan-on-a-hand navigation with platforming, and I've never been very good at it, but it's kind of cool to see the motion of a planetary system go to one of the items that you need. I always thought that was actually just very nice, just for the feeling itself to do that. It's a very nice usage of animation to make you think about how you're moving through something in 3 dimensions. I still enjoy the 32-bit splendor of that to this day. The rocket ship one is nice. I actually think it's hilarious when you have these shooters kill themselves, or at least lend themselves to their own demise. I don't know why. I guess I really am a sadist. I just take pleasure in the displeasure of others. What can I say? But alas, what holds it back is that there wasn't much to really tie it together other than you get your feet pieces and then you're off. So it has the same struggles as Bankenstein, for instance. And I don't think it really works as well as we would like it to. I am going to put that in C. I guess we can put it above the Demon. I was not a big fan. I like what the puzzles do, but again, when I'm thinking about the fact that this could have been a venture that was, more fruitfully designed and expanded on, which I could absolutely see them doing, they decided not to take the opportunity on it, and I think they should have. And this is where I would sort of betray the sense of intention when it comes to a developer and say that you could have still done something like that. And I know you get the chalice in the last section of the time machine, which is with the Ripper once you beat him. I still think you could have spaced things out a little bit more and done that with the time machine here. And the same goes for the time machine for the sewers. So we're returning to the sewers shortly after we had just gone there for our full venture. I don't really have much to say about that. Other than that, I think it could be the worst of the bunch. It's definitely one of them. I don't like the return to the sewers because it strips the original atmosphere that we felt in our time there, which I think was supposed to be lightning in a bottle. I think that should have been contained for what it was at the time. We're now going back in an attempt of turning things on their head where we had befriended them at one point, and now we are an adversary to their purposes of retaining what they find valuable and what we need in order to go and save Kia as a pursuit of time machinations. It does evoke a parallel world, interestingly, where we are looking between those two differences based on how they approach us, how we are appreciated in one and not so much in the other. But given how quickly we are leaving this area, basically, Kay thinks bye after we grab our item, there's nothing meaningful to that. And it is the level I am happy is short because I just want to blitz through it as quickly as I can. I'm sorry. You are not the original sewers, and you are not something I care to place higher, unfortunately. I am so sorry, Time Machine sewers. But what about the Ripper? I do not like the Ripper as a boss. I like the Ripper as a character. Oh my goodness, is that Slenderman-like silhouette really good for a villain? Even a main antagonist is something that, you could have auditioned this guy for. MediEvil 2. It's his height, it's his eyes, it's the laugh that combines the structure of his being himself and the way he actually carries his aggression out towards you when you actually fight him in this encounter. He's scary as hell. For those of you who were scarred for life and had many nightmares as a result of this being in MediEvil 2, I'm very sorry, I understand, and I hope you got the therapy you needed. There's not too much to make work of here. You're trying to discern his vulnerability in the pursuits that he's making. His wall vaults are nice, and I love how the camera pans back to give you a sense of the space that you are working with there, which corresponds well with all the blood scratch marks we are seeing all across the alleyway and on the cobblestones as we try to take this guy down. There is a dread there, and a true sense of horror as we are fighting what is a pervert gone mad. There's then the damsel in distress gimmick, which works for our purposes here. It's fine. It actually adds to the malevolence of what the Ripper is trying to portray. I actually think that was well done with Cambridge. It's just something that's been, I think, already done to death at that point already, and my goodness, we're in 2025 right now. How many times has that been done? But I digress. For its time, I guess you could say it was something of an attempt at innovation, though it was really just a mechanization of making sure that you were taking care of something in addition to taking care of a boss. So, we are preserving life while ending another. Preserving good, ending evil. Just given how things aren't really well executed here, I fail to feel what's at stake here, and I know that will gather some disagreements for me. That's totally okay. But I do think when it comes to boss fights, this is pretty much close to the bottom. in terms of the entire series. You could tie it with some of the other ones, like perhaps the Guardians in Return to the Graveyard or something like that, or something in Resurrection, for instance. But the Ripper is going to go in D, and I am going to put it, I think, at the very bottom. The only good thing I can say about it is good riddance to the Ripper when we take him down, and the armor is a very nice touch at the end. Makes you feel like a badass, makes you feel like a total Chad. And hey, look at that! We are going from what I think is a rather poor fight to a rather good one. So the Tyrannosaurus Rex is your first boss fight, and it is your first encounter between the museum and the wider world in Kensington. And Tyrannosaurus Rex has Shadow of the Colossus vibes. This is the stuff of spectacle, and we get to feel this immediately as we play the game, so it's well placed in terms of where we are at. We are still getting to know what the game is, and the developers are telling us, here's a boss fight, here you go. And you'll get your first life bottle after that too, as a little cherry on top. The Tyrannosaurus Rex is really spectacle in form, and we get a sense of that especially when the music kicks in. It's the first time we are hearing the boss fight, which we will hear in other encounters, including the one we just mentioned. It is best placed here, I think. It is not as good as what we have with the Count, but when it comes to Tyrannosaurus Rex, it is the same idea. We are waiting for a window of opportunity to see when the guy is vulnerable, and then to exploit that in the moment. And it works well. It has a nice feeling where you actually have to climb on top of this massive beast. And to address the power source that you have there, it's very basic to start, but then the second phase is fantastic. This is thoughtfully done, because we have to go to another section there, which I think actually renders the danger escalation higher, because we need to go to another section. We actually get to feel the shakes and the sense of mass, even when we are in the stairwell section making our way up. We then go up and we get to see this next phase flying in epic splendor before us. I think this is how boss fights should operate. There should be a sense of change that comes, that forces you to adapt, but also to enjoy another form of what it is that you are trying to overcome. It is great in theme, it is wonderful to take down, and it sets the sequel up amazingly. This is how you start a game off. This is the stuff of FromSoft games, this is the stuff of a great Zelda game. This is what you do when you want to bring the player into your universe. You give them a level that expresses the machinations and accessible nature of what it is that you will be doing for the rest of the game as it increases in difficulty and variety, but also with a boss fight. I think we're going to put you at the bottom of 8, just before Iron Slugger, so that people don't try and track me down and beat me senseless for putting it above what is the boxer here. I don't want to get all boxed myself, so yeah. Okay, I'll leave it there. Please don't hurt me. And what do we have here next? We have 2 levels left, and these are 2 of the best levels in the entire series. Oh my goodness. I did not plan any of this, as I've mentioned before. It looks like Whitechapel is next on the list. And where do we start from here? I guess we can just go ahead and say that this is... Oh, we'll wait a little bit, actually. It's going to be S tier, promise you that. Whitechapel is the successor to the Sleeping Village, the way the Freak Show is in some ways a successor to Scarecrow Fields, or Kensington is a successor to the Graveyard. This is a town that is beautifully crafted and given the care that we expect from a team that is so in love with turning things on their head for the gratification of the player. I love running through the streets. I love bonking the heads of guards as I make my way from one puzzle to the next, looking at the torchlit sections of this 19th century city fully come to life, even in the midst of the living dead. The music again swoons with the strings as we venture out into the nightlife to look for Kia and to see what is going on in the dark atmosphere. We know that something bad is about to happen. We get a sense of that with Winston, and even the skybox as it kind of hungers above us, where we look from one section to the next. We're having a night out on the town, literally. What we are doing here is we have every corner and space put to great use, and we get to enjoy it with every part of our exploration. You might complain, for instance, that the guards and the police kind of make you... how do I put this? They make you move away from the parts of the level that you would like to take notice of otherwise. And that is something I like to do in games. Sometimes I just like to put the controller down, damn it, and to see what it is that's imbued around the architecture and the considerations of space, lighting, and artistic direction that comes together when I am in that single space at that moment. I do that in games all the time. And you can't do that in this part of the town in many sections, except for the more isolated regions where the guards don't explore. And even then, it's beautiful. Lights emanating from the windows, you're looking at all these secret spaces that are saying, hey, maybe you can climb this, maybe you can go around that. You go down chimneys, you go in basements. Stand on the Hand allows you to see the level in a new way as well. You're going to previous sections as well, like the graveyard, in order to deal with an extremely rich socialist, which I think is a nice little joke there. Until you make your way to the nightclub before the tragic encounter with Kia and the Ripper, which is heart-wrenching as it is horrifying. I cannot believe how effectively that was executed. It actually makes one feel uneasy. You could honestly just put your controller down there in the fashion that I just mentioned, based on the effect that can have on you. It's so unexpected that really what this is about is that it's a rescue mission gone bad. This level is about failure. And I think everything that leads up to that moment is a bit of a foreshadow, just slightly gentle. While you're exploring your way around there is a sense of doom in the back of it. You feel it in the music, you feel it in the lighting. Just the fact that it is dark at night gives you a sense that something is awry to begin with. And the ending is really serving as a point in the game to retrieve our sense of heroism in Dan through rescuing Kia. But again, it is about failure. You don't get to achieve that in this case. Not everything goes according to plan. I like that twist was thrown in here. Absolutely everything feels harmonized, it feels orchestrated together. There is not a single thing I can actually think of when it comes to a flaw for what these guys were trying to do. This is the level we know MediEvil for. This is what we love about the series. It is when all of the things, factors, characteristics of something that we want from a hack and slash level that captures the player in this pool of adventure, with grand artistic direction, clever puzzles, and a variety of things to explore, invite, and have added to it the charm of humor and delicacy. And by delicacy, I actually really mean style, because this is all Gothic driven. This is the 19th century London that we sort of come to expect, especially as someone who is not himself a Londoner or English. I'm looking at this as though, this is what we see in the 19th century drab England, that I would want to experience in some kind of fictional tale. This is what I love. It is a dark fantasy mashup for goth-driven artistry, experimental gameplay, and English humor, all covered in a music that delights our senses from beginning to the end. Everything is interconnected between all of the factors that we know go into the design of a MediEvil level, and this is about as good as it gets, with a few notable exceptions. And even then, it's by very, very little. Whitechapel is one of the finest from Cambridge Studio. But, and this was not planned, I promise. I know I keep saying that, but Wolfram Hall. Oh my goodness, Wolfram Hall. Wolfram Hall. I could do pages and pages on what I have here for notes and the thoughts and considerations I have for what I feel this level is able to achieve. I have here at least a page of notes in terms of what this level achieved in gaming, not just in MediEvil 2. Where do you even start with something like this? Wolfram Hall is my favorite level in MediEvil 2. It was actually at one point almost a consideration for my favorite level in the entire series, but as we will see in the next tier list for MediEvil, that's not quite the case, but wow is it close. Wolfram Hall is nonetheless arguably the best that there is. It is beautifully macabre, it is a telltale experience of a mansion set in this time period that is full of darkness and looming mystery as we uncover what that said mystery is further and further within every level that we make our way through until the end. It is a mansion twisted in immaculate darkness with Victorian fashion. Every room, as with everything we've said before, is something that is purpose-driven, and I love going through them back and forth. I love even going through previous rooms. love seeing how the lighting brings out the decorations and the details that were added in the floors, the ceilings, the gargoyle statues, the artwork that was done from times of antiquity that are embedded all along the walls, for instance. Light coming in through the windows, the list goes on. The chandeliers that decorate the ceiling, the aristocratic pictures. It is all an incredible level of small design choices that come together to near perfection. This is the best it gets for something like this. Any kind of game where you would have this time period or setting, it ranks with the best of those games as well. I'm not even joking. I could play Bloodborne and I could think of Wolfram Hall. The mood is ceaselessly drawn into what we would experience through something like a Stoker novel, the fantasy of something dark and twisted behind the scenes. Bob and Barn contrived one of the greatest pieces that they've ever done, which arrests the player in the house's frightening mystery of what it actually contains and what we need to do here. You want this song to play again and again. And I'm glad that they were able to just have the song present for this region alone and that it wasn't reused for something that might have had a similar setting that we experienced in Wolfram Hall. That adds to the uniqueness and what it is that's so special about it. The atmosphere of Wolfram Hall is spellbinding. And again, the small design choices that we already mentioned before about the aristocratic caricatures that line against all the bookshelves, the furniture, with servants wandering around endlessly in their madness in terms of their corruption, but alongside the lighting as well. There is danger, but a kind of stillness that comes with that as well. And you feel that stillness especially when you're addressing the puzzles with the vampires. I don't know why I feel that when I am there. Could you ever talk about a greater use of space than that? Yes, the key function of these rooms is to decipher a way in which you can push these coffins beneath the lights so that we are ending these vampires for good. But it just does something more. What I like too about them is that they have a sense of freedom to them. We see what we might be doing in a Zelda dungeon or something like that. I feel that actually being emanated here as well, where we actually are at liberties to try a few things with some of the reasons. Not all of them. The first room and the last room, for instance, there is more of a specific way of executing how you need to take care of these vampires before proceeding. But otherwise, I have been able to try different things in different orders of operation when we are actually trying to end them one by one, in grisly fashion, I might add, before going to the next room. And going from room to room. This is adventure. This is goth. You know, what's next? What's around the corner? What are we going to do? What is the next room actually going to do with vampires? Are there going to be more vampires? Is the room going to be bigger? And oftentimes we receive an answer to these questions with a resounding satisfaction. And I do mean satisfaction. Everything here is really about ever-growing satisfaction. If you think you're enjoying the level within the first few minutes, just wait. It begins when you are outside. It increases with curiosity as you attach your head to a hand to go inside and see what it's like and go, I get to go in this building? And yes, you do. You get to experience that level in its fulsome creativity. It really allows for an experience most immersive and one of my personal greatest ever with games, and that really is not a joke. It develops our way to the finale account in this blissful procession, part by part, before we get to the grand finale, which is the boss fight to follow. If this had been the same level, and in a way it is, it might have actually been the best. Though, I still think that would have been just about impossible to counter. But nonetheless, given that we have Wolfram Hall as the best in this, I think that's good enough. And I think that's enough of an honor to grant this wonderful mansion and household that I will forever hold in my heart, onwards and forever. It is very important to me, as it is to many other fans I suspect as well. So we're going to put that at number 1. I did not mean to save the best for last, but inadvertently we have. Wolfram Hall, thank you. What a wonderful way to end the list. But I guess what we can do before we end this video is to take a look at these levels and see if we want to make any changes. I did do that in the last video for Resurrection, but at a quick glance, this looks pretty good, and it looks pretty consistent with the things that I have said about these levels in the past, both in my videos and on Reddit threads as well. Really looking at this, I think the placements are quite fair and reasonable. I think it's these two that bother me a little bit because I don't think either of these levels are bad, and B is not a bad tier. B is not for bad. B is actually good, decent. I think these levels accomplish a lot for what they meant to do. I guess they just don't gravitate to something that I like to feel about the human condition as I do for many of these other levels, especially Wolfram Hall, as I just tried to describe. I could go on endlessly about this and why it is the best level in the game. But I think I will leave it there for now. Sorry, I'm just reminded of a reading I had done here. I'm reading The Poetics of Space by Monsieur Bachelard, Gaston Bachelard, who was a philosopher. And I'm reminded of something he said in one of the first chapters here. I did just start reading this book after all. That by remembering houses and rooms, we learn to abide within ourselves. Now everything becomes clear. The house images move in both directions. They are in us as much as we are in them. Not only our memories, but the things we have forgotten are housed. Our soul is an abode. That is something that comes to my head and my heart when I think of something like Wolfram Hall and anything that I really hold dear in terms of my gaming experiences through the games that I've gone through and have loved. And that is the experience for just about actually everything here in the top category of the levels that we have gone through, but with Wolfram Hall especially. And that is it. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, I am so sorry it took so long to do this video. I am going to try and be more consistent with the cadence throughout the rest of this year. I am still new to this whole YouTube tier list thing and, well, YouTube in general, so I still have so much to learn. All I can say is I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know what your thoughts are, and again, there will be a link for the tier list below as well if you care to play around with it yourself. Thank you so much for stopping by, and take good care. Bye.